Welcome to episode 44 of What's a Beautiful Life Anyway. We all have challenges in our life, and to live our best life, we need to find a way to overcome these challenges. My guest today can help you overcome one of the most difficult challenges women have to tackle in life today, and that's the menopause. Hannah Charman found herself beyond the help of mainstream medicine when she was just 14, and she used a number of alternative treatments to recover from chronic fatigue syndrome. She went on to train in Reiki at the age of 16 and then to qualify as a medical herbalist in 1999, following 4 years of very intensive training. Since then, Hannah has specialised in supporting women who can't or don't want to take HRT, combining prescribed herbal medicine with health coaching and advanced hypnotherapy into a unique treatment program. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. Now I've got dogs scratching on my door. Right, come on, get in and behave yourselves. I told you not to go out there, didn't I? What's out there? I normally record in one go, so this is very annoying today.
It's fine.
Hannah, I love it that you trained in Reiki when you were only 16 years old. That is quite incredible. Tell us more about how you got into herbal medicine.
What we say in herbal medicine is often that the herbs choose you more than you choose the herbs. It's a bit of a calling, really. So I obviously had the chronic fatigue syndrome from when I was 14, and the Reiki saw the last of that off when I did the course when I was 16. And I did my best to get as many decent GCSE grades as I could, and somehow managed to win the French prize for the French GCSE, which I was like very surprised about, because it was a very difficult balance to sort of get the academic side nailed, but without falling ill with the chronic fatigue again. It was quite a tricky balancing act. Anyway, I won a book token for getting the French prize. And with it, I bought David Hoffman's book, The New Holistic Herbal, which wasn't new at all. It was sort of very beardy photos taken in Findhorn in the early 70s in black and white. So, but it's the best book. It was the one that really inspired me to become a herbalist. I've still got it on the shelf there somewhere, actually. And so that's what inspired me. And it just worked out that there was a degree course in Western herbal medicine setting up at Middlesex University at around about the same time. So I got onto that course, fortunately. And it was a tough course. All of the accredited herbal medicine courses are, but it was well worth it. And I just still love my job more every day. And I've been doing it now 23 years, 24 years. So, yeah.
I love the fact that you started from when you finished education, really, because so many women that I interview, they find their dream, but it's usually they've had a normal career path, they may have had children, they've become ill, they've found a therapy that's helped them, and then they've trained in it. So I think it's wonderful that you found this at such an early age. I think it's so inspiring. Like, we'll have to try and get more young people to listen to this so that, you know,
I was just very fortunate, because obviously that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been ill with the chronic fatigue. So I think it was definitely meant to be. And it wasn't just my life that changed either. It was my whole family. You know, my parents both quit their jobs and trained in hypnotherapy after they saw the difference that the hypnotherapy made to me. So it was definitely meant to be, I think.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So before we talk about menopause and perimenopause, tell us first of all, what is a medical herbalist?
Medical herbalist is probably something that most of your listeners have never heard of. We are Britain's best kept secret, as far as I'm concerned. So it's not a protected title. So any of you could go out tomorrow, call yourselves a medical herbalist, and you wouldn't be doing anything illegal. But a true medical herbalist is properly trained in the art and science of herbal medicine. And that's usually over 3 to 5 years. And a lot of our training crosses over with mainstream medical training as well. So we do our anatomy and physiology, but we also do clinical skills, clinical training. We learn about mainstream medicines and obviously the herbal medicines. We learn counselling skills and so on. And I had to do 450 hours of clinical training as well. We had a training clinic at a hospital in London. So I was there quite a bit. just getting the real hands-on experience with the patients before I qualified.
I think it's an amazing thing, and I think more doctors should be trained in it. There should be more herbal medical specialists, because you're looking, and we'll come to this a bit later, but you're looking more holistically, not just looking at an ailment and giving something that might mask the symptom. You're actually looking at the underlying cause, and I love the hypnotherapy side of it as well. So you're getting into the person and trying to work out where this is coming from. How do you see the perimenopause?
I am very much in the it's a natural transition camp. It's not an illness. It's not something that needs to be medicated necessarily. With a very small minority of women, it does need to be medicated, but for the most of us, it's a rite of passage. And you know, if you look at the traditions around the world, including in this part of the world, actually until very recently, menopause was seen as a time of empowerment, and when we would consolidate all of our wisdom and our life experience that we've accumulated over the years. And some even described it as like a mini death and a rebirth. It's, you know, the old you is falling away and a newer, wiser crone version of yourself is being born. And you know, I knew the theory of this, but I hadn't really grasped what that felt like, because for some reason I thought, oh, you know, I go to bed one night and then I wake up this wise woman, and it doesn't work like that. Obviously it takes years, and there's a lot of breaking down that can often happen in order to break through and become this newer, wiser version of yourself. So to me, perimenopause, it's a physical experience. We get the physical symptoms like the hot flushes and the fatigue and the mood swings and the aches and pains and all of that. It's a psycho-emotional experience. You know, we start to question our beliefs. We start to lose our tolerance of people that we've previously been very tolerant of. You know, people, places and things that no longer work for us start to fall away. And that can also obviously be quite difficult to deal with. But there's also a spiritual aspect to it as well. That's what I say. It's a death and a rebirth into this new, wiser version of yourself. And those kinds of symptoms are the ones that aren't very often talked about and are quite hard to describe. But it's things like feeling like you want to be on your own, feeling disconnected from those people around you, feeling flat, like you completely lost your mojo. And you know, it doesn't really have a name. You can't go to the doctor and go, I've just lost my mojo, I just feel flat. And they'll say, well, do you mean you're depressed? And it's like, no, I'm not exactly depressed, I'm just not myself. But this can go on for months or even years. And if people don't understand that that's all part of the process and learn to roll with it, it can become very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I think for different people, the symptoms are so different, aren't they? One person feel one thing, and because I was very lucky really with mine, I think.
Yeah, some lucky souls don't get any symptoms at all.
No, I think my husband would disagree. He'd say I was stroppy.
Well,
you know, I think I've always been a bit stroppy with him anyway. So, okay, so we've looked at what a medical herbalist is, but tell us what herbal medicine is and the different ways that it can be used, and then we can look at how that fits in with the whole perimenopause.
So herbal medicine in a nutshell is medicine made from medicinal plants. And it can be in any form. So it's not quite the same as homeopathy, because that's more of an energetic medicine made from plants, but also animals and minerals as well. And it's not our tradition that we have in the Western world is very different to the Chinese herbal medicine that you might have heard of. But the forms that we use the herbs in are kind of quite varied. So you can obviously just add herbs into your food. You can make them into herbal teas. You can make powders from them and take them in capsules. I tend to use tinctures, which is like a preparation made from alcohol, water, and herbs. So you steep the herbs in a solution, and the alcohol pulls out some of the constituents whilst the water pulls out the other ones. But we can make any form of medicine that you could get from your pharmacy. We can make a herbal version of. So I make creams and oils and lotions and nasal sprays and pessaries and, you know, all kinds of different things.
That's incredible that you can make all those different things.
it came in very handy during COVID when there were shortages. So there was panic buys on of different medicines. And I thought, oh, thank goodness I've learned how to make herbal medicines from scratch, because the plus side with that was that it sort of kicked off just as spring was around the corner. So we were able to go out and forage herbs locally and from the garden and make our own medicines, luckily.
Yeah. And I know I've always preferred a more natural remedy than taking drugs of any sort. And I think more and more people are coming around to that way of thinking, aren't they? I mean, for me, taking HRT was a complete no-brainer. There was no way I was ever going to take HRT. And luckily, my GP, when she told me a blood test had suggested I was perimenopausal, and she just said, but we don't need to go down the HRT route unless it becomes really necessary. And I said to her then, well, I've got no intentions of taking it.
No, it's not very widely talked about, but there are concerns amongst doctors about the big push for HRT, particularly because at the moment there's no long-term safety studies with the newer forms of HRT that we're using. And I know some women swear by it. My grandma was one. She was on HRT till she died at 87 and never had a problem with it. So it's not that I'm anti-HRT at all, but I just think, you know, there's always two sides, isn't there? And I do see problems in clinic with women who are, you know, already in estrogen excess, and then they get put onto yet more estrogen in the form of HRT, and it just wrecks things for them. So I think part of the problem is adding in more hormone at a time when your body is naturally trying to reduce hormone levels. And I think there's also a bit of educating to be done with the doctors and looking out for certain symptoms and going, do you know what, it looks like you're already in estrogen excess, and I don't think it's a great idea to be adding in more estrogen. The poor doctors, bless them, it's not their fault, but they have to work to their protocols. And the protocols, I don't think, always serve women terribly well. So
and
it's a very personal choice.
Yeah, it is a personal choice, but also we're all so different. So why would we think that one thing would suit all of us? I was really shocked recently when I was listening to a Zoe podcast, and Sarah Berry on there, she's a doctor of something, but she does a lot of research into the microbiome and things that help. And she said that up until very recently, they never used to research new drugs on women because they knew they knew that because of a woman's cycle, it would affect them all differently. So they never did any medical research into new drugs on women. They recognized that it was different at different times of the month, and then just decided to give them the ones they tested on the men, but in a slightly lower dose because women were smaller. And you think, hello, you know, what on earth is going on? It's shocking, really. It is shocking, really. I think we're much better off having something much more natural.
I think so. And it's not just about the herbs either with herbal medicine. It used to be when I was first training, you know, we were sort of taught to see the patient, take the full case history, give them some herbal medicine to take away, see them a short time later, review how they were going. Now it's much, much bigger than that, because I think there are so many gaps elsewhere in the healthcare system that aren't being filled. You know, doctors don't have time to sit down and have a proper listen to a woman and understand what's really going on. They have an average of 7 minutes to do that. You can't do anything in 7 minutes. There's no moral support there. There's no advocacy. There's no one to listen to her when no one else is listening. There's no guidance on lifestyle and diet, which is a big part of it.
Huge part.
So we now fill all of those gaps.
It's diet and lifestyle, we know from modern day research, affects so much of what goes on with us. And you're absolutely right. It should be a key part of it. But doctors just, I think they get about an hour's nutrition training in the whole of their medical training.
It's interesting because they're starting finally to cotton on to this now. And there's quite an exodus of doctors who are retraining as medical herbalists, and they say the medical herbalist training is harder than their original medical training, which is interesting, but also training in functional medicine, which is basically that. It's diet, lifestyle, nutrition, and all of those things. And they're saying, it's, you know, it's amazing. This is revolutionary. It's the best thing since sliced bread. It's like, we've been telling you this for decades, and you called us quacks and charlatans, and you've degraded us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you're like, oh, we've just had a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
It's really quite funny.
When I was on Brooklands Radio, I interviewed quite a few doctors who'd left the health service to set up clinics. And a lot of them were so sort of, they'd fallen out of love with the NHS because they recognised they were just treating the symptom. They weren't looking for the underlying cause. And one guy I know has got a really successful practice in Weybridge in Surrey. And he literally looks at metabolic syndrome, he, you know, diet, exercise, hormones, so everything there is to look at. I know we're sort of going slightly off track here, although it's all really, really interesting. Why is herbal medicine so brilliant for perimenopause? Now, can I just say before we start this, I had never heard the word perimenopause until I was told I was perimenopausal. I'd never heard that word before, which in itself is wrong. I think it's you know, these days there's a lot more things going on with celebrities coming out and talking about their perimenopause and their menopause. But why is it that herbal medicine is so brilliant for it?
I think it's mostly because you can tailor it exactly to what that woman needs at the time. It's very versatile, it's very flexible, and it's tailor-made to the person. So herbs, as I see them, are what I would call intelligent medicines. You know, you give someone a herb, it kind of knows where to go and what to do, and it just gets on with it. And each herb can do several different things. So a herb would have what we call a main action, which is like its main superpower. And then it has other little talents that it has as well. So I would typically mix together maybe 6 or 7 herbs into one bottle. So you can tackle lots of different areas at the same time. And the way I build my prescriptions is that I'm taking menopause in the context of that woman's broader health picture. So in my first consultation, I go through all of her entire medical history from birth up to the present day. And very often what we find is that if they're having a terrible menopause, usually there are warning signs decades before that something's not right hormonally. You know, she might have a diagnosed gynae condition like polycystic ovaries or something like that, or endometriosis. And so the hormones have never been right. And then menopause comes along and just throws everything off the scale. Often there's problems with things like gut health and chronic inflammation and mental health and so on. So we're taking menopause in a much bigger picture. So I build my prescriptions accordingly. So the sort of bottom layer, if you like, is addressing those very chronic underlying issues that are sitting behind it. Then I would use herbs like nervines and adaptogens to help her out of chronic stress, because we're all in chronic stress and it really does impact the way our hormones work. So the nervines work directly on the nervous system. So it's herbs like valerian or chamomile or St. John's wort. Those are sort of typical nervines, but then also adaptogens, which have a more sort of generic action on taking your body out of its stress response. So typical adaptogens would be things like ashwagandha, Siberian ginseng, licorice, those kinds of things. Then I add in herbs specifically for hormone balance. So we have herbs that contain phytoestrogens, but also herbs that will gently raise testosterone levels if we need them to do that, and progesterone as well. And then the top layer, if you like, the icing on the cake, is to tackle the individual symptoms, because I have specific herbs that will do hot flushes and palpitations and fatigue and brain fog and all of those lovely delights that us ladies get to experience in perimenopause. So we're tackling the symptoms and the underlying causes all at the same time.
Which sounds amazing. And I love the fact that you also help the mindset with the hypnotherapy and the diet and the diet and the exercise, because clearly that has a huge effect on how someone's feeling. You know, if there's the whole...
Well, absolutely. I mean, for years I worked as a traditional herbalist, and we touched a little bit on diet and exercise, but we didn't really go into it. And then it dawned on me a few years ago that so many of my patients were taking their herbs that they were paying good money for, and then going home and having chicken and chips for tea every night, or they weren't sleeping, or they were stressing out in their job, and they weren't getting better as fast as either of us would have liked. And the herbs really didn't stand much of a chance, because none of those foundations of good health were there. So I started offering health coaching, and it just made a huge difference really quickly. But But then I was finding, you know, that some of my patients were saying, okay, I know I need to be eating chicken salad. You know, I know I've gone out, I've bought the chicken, I've bought the salad, but I'm still stuffing my face with cake every night. I can't stop eating cake. And that's usually a pattern up here. That's a self-sabotage pattern that's going on. And the only way to deal with that is to work on the deep psycho-emotional stuff that sits behind it. Hence why I introduced the hypnotherapy. So now that there is no excuse, you know, the menopause symptoms have nowhere left to hide.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what level they're manifesting on. We have all bases covered now. And it works, you know, people get about an 80% improvement within 12 weeks. And I think it works every bit as fast as HRT does in many cases. Not always, but, you know, quite often it does.
But it's holistic. And so, you know, moving on nicely, why is that holistic approach so important?
I think because we're multifaceted beings, we're not just flesh and blood, are we? We're complex creatures. And, you know, emotional stuff comes into it, stress comes into it, you know, exhaustion and so on. And, you know, it's important to address all of those areas at the same time if you really want to truly heal. Menopause, to me, I think has a lot of gifts that it brings with it. I know not everyone would see it that way. I know for some women it's absolutely horrendous and very debilitating, very life-changing, but it also does have its gifts. And, you know, a lot of ladies say, well, I'm loving that I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I feel so liberated. I feel very calm. You know, I've moved on from that job that I worked in forever because I hated it. And, you know, that's never what I wanted to do. And now I can go ahead and do it. And there's lots of pluses to being menopausal. The problem, I think, is largely that our society doesn't treasure older women or men in the way that we would have done previously. We've got years of wisdom. I love hanging out with older people because they're so wise. There's nothing they haven't seen or heard. They've been through it all. And, you know, some stories I've heard from women in their 80s before there was, you know, benefits and a welfare state and a good education system. I think, how on earth did you do all those things? You know, we wouldn't dream of doing them now. And there are still people around who were born during the war, and that's quite interesting to learn about as well.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I wish we would just hold older people in higher regard than we do, because it does impact the way we feel about getting older ourselves.
Yeah. And they have just such a wisdom, don't they, that we need to tap into more while they're still able to tell us these things. It's I think the benefits, you're right, there's so many of them. I mean, not being able to get pregnant is, for most people, is a benefit.
For those ladies who have done that or never wanted to do that.
And if you think back to the 50s, before birth control came in, that was probably such a plus for people, probably way outweighing the fact that they had some symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been amazing. Okay, well, I think this is just such good stuff, Hannah. I think, you know, everybody needs to listen to this. I have actually sent your details to a friend today as well, who I know
thank you
might need some help, which is good. So let's have a think. Can herbs and HRT be taken together?
Yes, they are quite frequently. There are certain herbs that I wouldn't prescribe to a lady who's on HRT, because although they're natural and on the whole safe, you do still need to use them with respect and care. So yeah, there are some that I would avoid, and some that I would avoid with other medications as well besides HRT, because some women are taking blood pressure medication or antidepressants or those sorts of things, and you still need to look out for potential interactions between the two. But yes, it can be done safely, and it quite often is. Okay.
And herbs are safe if you're undergoing cancer treatment or you're on sort of post-cancer treatment drugs. Is it still?
So this is quite a big thing for ladies in perimenopause who have previously had cancer, because they are not encouraged to take HRT, particularly if it was an estrogen receptive cancer. So many of them really do suffer because they don't know that there's an alternative out there that would work well for them. So herbs are safe to take if you've had cancer. I'm not allowed to talk about herbs whilst you have cancer. But certainly if you've had it and you are really struggling with perimenopause, then it's well worth looking at. There've been numerous studies over the years backing the use of phytoestrogenic herbs in protecting cancer reoccurring later in life. So it's definitely worth doing.
That sounds great. And you hear or you read stories quite often about HRT should be taken because it can protect you against this or that. Do herbs help protect your health after menopause?
Well, just to clarify, as we're recording this, that the thing around HRT protecting you from dementia, osteoporosis, and heart disease post-menopause is based on assumption rather than fact at this point in time. So what they're saying is, well, we know estrogen has a protective effect on those parts of the body. So therefore, if your estrogen levels drop in menopause, you're going to lose that protection and you would need to top it up with HRT. I don't think that's the whole story, because I don't know about you, but I know lots of older women who've never taken HRT and don't have any of those conditions. They are becoming more common, but that's due to other factors besides estrogen levels dropping. There is some evidence, there's a limited amount of evidence in herbal medicine in general, but when it comes to protecting against these things, so sage is a herb in particular that has been looked at very closely in recent years for its protective effects on the brain and its ability to protect against dementia, possibly even treat very, very early stage dementia as well. But there's even more research into diet and lifestyle changes. So again, for dementia, there's a doctor in the US called Dr. Dale Bredesen, who spent decades of his career studying this, and he's come up with what he calls the Bredesen protocol, which is to help reduce brain inflammation. And again, he claims, I've not looked into it, but he claims that he can reverse early stage dementia with diet and nutrition. And we know things like on the Alzheimer's research website, it talks about how 30 minutes exercise a day cuts your risk of dementia by up to 40%, which that's just one thing that we can all do, but it's not widely publicized, is it? Unfortunately. So, there's all this stuff out there. You just need to know to go and look for it.
Yeah. It's using your brain as well. You hear learn a language or do puzzles, or these things are all out there, but it is amazing how many people don't do it.
I think we're being discouraged from thinking for ourselves these days. Yeah. Critical thinking it's not encouraged in schools.
No.
And it's not encouraged in adulthood either. And I think we need to keep critical thinking, because it's really interesting. Apart from anything else, it's interesting to sit down and have a good debate with someone.
Oh, yeah, it certainly is.
And to look at things from lots of different angles.
Yeah. Going back to the HRT, no HRT, I know a few people who have had HRT but then had postmenopause bleeding and have been told they can't take HRT because of the estrogen. So in my mind, it does more harm than good, but obviously I'm not an expert in that area.
Again, it's a very individual thing. So some women completely swear by HRT and say it saved their lives, literally, and other women say they just can't get on with it. Most doctors will say that you need to allow a period of time for things to settle down again. You may need to adjust dosages or even go on to a different preparation altogether. Not everyone's prepared to do that. And there are, ladies are concerned about how their bodies change when they go on to HRT and think, I just don't feel right. This doesn't seem right. So it's entirely up to the individual what they do, and all I do is support them in that. I do get ladies who are on HRT but want to come off, and we do that with the support of the herbs. Or I have ladies who say, I want to continue taking my HRT because it's fixed this bunch of symptoms, but it's not fixed that bunch of symptoms. So can we use the herbs for those?
Yeah.
It's very much down to what the person wants, and we just work with that, really.
Yeah, which is the beauty of it, I think. It is personalized. I noticed on your website that you have a menopause toolkit.
Yes, so I've got 2 home learning programs, because not everyone needs full-on menopause treatment, but they need something.
Yeah.
And you can certainly waste years of your life Googling and getting very confused at all the conflicting advice, but also waste lots of money on supplements and things as well. So I've got 2 home learning programs, which are all about self-care. And the basic one is the menopause toolkit. So that's over 5 days. It's just little short half-hour lessons covering the most common menopause symptoms and what you can do about them. And then the bigger one is called Rejuvenate, and that's 8 modules which cover everything. So you can either just do the modules that you're interested in, or you can do all 8 modules.
Well, I'll maybe put links to those up in the show notes.
Yeah.
If they're interested in having another look at that.
Mm.
Where can people find out more, Hannah?
Lots of places. I'm all over the shop. So I have a YouTube channel, which is Physic Health Consulting. I have my website, which is www.physichealth.uk. There's lots of bots and free downloads and all kinds of goodies on there. I run a menopause cafe online, second Tuesday of every month at lunchtime. And we choose a different theme for every month, and it's just really nice and friendly. And there's some of the ladies there have made friends with each other and done a bit of business networking as well. So you're welcome to come to any of those. And I'm on LinkedIn as well as Hannah Charman. So I'm all over the place, really. Okay,
well, we'll put lots of those links in the show notes as well, so that people can find you easily and have a look at your information and get in touch.
Thank you.
Something that they need. So Hannah, thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you
today. Thank you.
It's been lovely.
Oh no, it's been really lovely.